Uh, although he mentioned my Santa Barbara credits, that's where I lived. But Ventura's was my poetry home. This is where I first read poetry and met the people that inspired me to write. Yes, it is. And somehow Ventura is still the most welcoming place I know. Well, I'm going to read you the poems I've written this year. I haven't been actually writing a lot in recent years, but I was feeling nostalgic for my friends here this year. I had a plan early on to visit California, so I knew I was coming. And it's in the confluence of lots of other stuff. You know, stuff goes on and on and on. Most of these, or a number of these poems are ars poeticas. And I have a friend who writes almost only ars poeticas. And I deride him very seriously that you can't do that. It's too easy to write about poetry. And here I am, giving you a tour of these. This one is called Credo. Do you know any poets who write about work? Their work, I mean, their real job. Of course, poetry is work. I've read plenty of poems on that, wrote some myself. It's noble, isn't it? Jamming square words into the round holes of thoughts one doesn't understand. I never write about my jobs, the work into which I have poured most of the best hours of my best days. I'm not embarrassed to work, that I often enjoy what I'm doing, what I'm asked to do, even if many days my abilities are spent on things I would prefer not. I worked with computers more than 20 years. I'm not embarrassed by that either. So I don't know why this is the first mention that's ever worked its way into a poem. I've been a teacher even longer, and yet never write about students nor the subjects I so eloquently explained and edified to their enthusiastic ignorance. I'm not embarrassed to be a poet, though it's not the first thing I tell about myself. You're more likely to learn I can't stand to drink from a cup that sat on a saucer in a splash of coffee than to learn how worry for words sustains my decision to stay in the world, to endure and fail the logic that connects those who purposely hurt to those undeserving of pain, those who have so much to those who want so little, those whom luck touches to those dreams abandon. I am proud of that job, that argument with prosody. I romanticize it. When writing on the subject of writing, I wax passionately over paper and pens and pencils, never mentioning keyboards or laptops or LCD screens, which are what I mostly use. I live in bookshops, doze among long rows of poetry filled with lifetimes. All that struggle and discovery and wisdom no one will ever read. They are all worth writing. The job comes with immeasurable benefits: the dance with truth, the pleasure of poets' company. It's fun to read poems to other poets, knowing even if they only half listen, they're still likely to applaud. I know the true joy of being a poet comes while I am writing, not after I stop. I know who I'm writing for, and it's not the ages. The ages will take care of themselves without me. This is a poem that I wrote about a poetry group I was in Santa Barbara. It was a lovely nest of loving people, I can tell you. Barry Spax, Marty Williams, Chris Yost. We all wrote very differently from each other, and somehow we helped each other because we loved what we were doing and we loved each other's company. I hear sad news, helpless but to believe it. I take sorrow for a slow walk in a stunned garden. The grass and I have failed each other. I have failed to teach it where not to grow, and it has failed to teach me it doesn't give a shit. It's hard to say anything is different, as everything is the same, just not in the exact way as before. It rained yesterday, and now a cover of leaves waits to be raked off the grass. it will wait a while longer. Except for rain and bad news, there is nothing to separate this day from the one before or the one before that, which was truly ordinary. Car engines replace the washed air, 2 dogs bark at nothing, children yell over everything. I start humming American tune, which always makes me cry. It was my sister who first told me it was prudent not to sing aloud. As in most things, I was slow to grasp the wisdom. I sing, but only I and the lost stars recognize this as song. The lost stars and I, homeless together after half an eternity. I sing all the time, melody winding over webs of neurons and synapses. Where thought convinces music, there are sounds too pure, too exact in their terrible understanding of timbre and the commonplace to be allowed in the air. Have you ever reached out to touch what wasn't there? A trick of light, a hair floating on the eye's brine, the mind imagining an answer to something. This morning, old friends come to visit with a coffee. It is so good to see them again. We sit around a table at one of their houses or mine, reading to each other what anguish tells paper. Our words are never as good as we hope, not even as good as we think, but we laugh anyway and have food and drink wine. Life is easier to explain with wine. I put their names here now to show this is not just a slick fiction invented to pull attention from my wooden voice. Chris drives headlong onto a freeway, hands steady, lanes gauged, her exits sharp and shimmer. With bare hands, Marty digs into chalk and loam to expose the ochre-stained bones. He plays like a flute. Barry tells me it's not about saying things, but about music, the streams of rhythm carrying echoes of creation that explain zilch. I give him his music, but hold out for words. I have something to say. I have nothing to say. This spring, my first romantic love died. It was over a long time, but we stayed in touch. Garland for Roger. He wasn't a good companion all the time, but I loved him so those folded years ago I could forget my name, and I suppose love him still. Then I believed true love came around only once. How easily it comes, for one reason or another, between early morning after dew ripens on the sharp edges of grass and late evening as porch lights surrender their purpose. And how easily it goes. Many days I imagine falling old together, hair depleted, bowed heads, counting pills, the hunt for lost slippers ending with some mumble about stupidity, crumbs of self-importance and deft taunts pulled into a diet of delicious squabbles expertly seasoned for decades. My bad ears and his bad eyes assembling to almost make one person. So little happens as expected. This afternoon should have rained, after clouds held the sky dark for hours in their brooding flight west. The drops must have fallen up out of the world. October, this is called predictions. October arrives drenched in tropical rain just as predicted. A young colleague teaching English at a small middle school south of Phnom Penh brings me to the umbrella of a core tree, which he insists students call kapok. A person needs a friend wise in the names of trees to advise against living a predictable life. I'm in no danger. Since we are far from the afternoon papers, I request the end of his kapok news. He proclaims green the rule for October and points to green pods dangling from branches like Christmas ornaments. They will turn the color of death before the new year, then burst to release their cotton hearts to the ground, he says, flaunting the smile of intellect. In the last century, a smile would not have been enough. Those days were burning and careless and rude. Those days were frenzied and righteous and decadent and exquisite and jaded, and those days expired. After the rain stops, this gore will lose all its leaves, a safe prediction. The ripe palmate fingers that now stubbornly refuse to loosen their grip will soon give up the will to hang on for one more day. A perfect leaf must be the first to fall, which I cannot say. The future is sure. I just don't know what will happen next. Well, I was writing mostly in the rainy season, so there a lot of rain falls on these pages, I'm noticing. And here's another. This is a year of simple differences. As for this season's rain, the final drop slipped only moments ago from a decaying champa leaf onto a whole year's dark rot. The sun has already forgotten what became of it. No season really ends, just as no season begins. Each day fits exactly into itself, hardly changed from the day before, until a year rises out of simple differences, as each person fits perfectly into themselves, the only perfection this world allows. When I woke this morning, my head hadn't finished with sleep. This seems the case many mornings and would not cause concern, except this morning becomes the afternoon I write my friend, whose clear, insistent voice called out in the dream that woke me to tell he was dying. He's been dying as long as any of us, but will reply in a day or two with medical names for good reasons. Things turn out as they're supposed to, something I've heard often, said myself, and choose to believe without evidence. It may be true. I put unbearable pain into cold water, into the dark backs of glooming clouds from which the water falls, into petals the water nourishes for a short time before rolling over bellies of rocks which whittle away a bit under the assault. Twilight brings a single cicada. Its shrill petition calls from everywhere and nowhere. You'll never find it. Earth's night slips away from sound into mysteries of season and light. Steam scatters from rooftops like lips separating from kisses. And whether desire is fulfilled or spurned, light will go out in one eye after another with something new to know. Black is the last kind of knowing, as nothing is there and nothing supposes the answer. And finally, I hope you are not breathing a sigh of relief at that statement. I had a big birthday this year and wrote a poem. Not really especially for my birthday. I wrote it for my birthday party, which I knew I planned for a long time and made a big deal out of. And my audience, of course, was what we like, a captured audience that can't get out. So this is called As Everyone Goes. I will die soon. I don't have specific news on this. I don't know a day or month. I don't know the year, though all have relocated closer. I am an age I thought impossible the first time I became a man, when thought was unsullied by thinking and youth could be sure of nearly everything. Now thoughts arrive humble and cautious, weighed down by an old man unsure of anything. A lot of people I've known are dead already. The ones remembered over steaming coffee or the wan autumn light wrapped around country bread and Cabernet are those I wish had stayed. Some I've wished death on are gone too, for which I hesitate to take all the credit, as everyone goes, with or without wishes. Imagine I stand on the edge of a precise universe which expands beyond understanding, a place hardly moved from the valley where everything begins, where I meet the best people I've ever known, the best people that could be known, who still elude the world's attention, despite their ordeal being no less epic than the thin flicker of those faraway flames crossing eternities to spill over the stutter that fills their names. Imagine that afternoon bends toward evening behind the backs of two aging men arguing, not over redoing the queen's last move in a game of chess, the dispute that sends them home the night before. They argue about a single word that falls between two other words on a piece of paper, a word that explains an evil so artful it whispers the sweet song of angels into the wind to steal the air. Their every syllable cut to silence, unable to breathe. Imagine this is the kind of day which even excuses fall short to explain. Though it is true, short excuses often bring serenity, especially late at night when air cools and calm descends around lamplight, making circles on these pages of lies like coffee stains. And the sharp point of a pencil finds its purpose in shaping words that spill fire over my thoughts, infinitely more beautiful and perceptive than these my ignorant fingers botch across the paper. Imagine you have just read a poem, not a poem that disappears easily into 100 others, but a really great poem with words so clear, so obvious, they fall into line, into patterns of breath, into the only way breathing can be explained. And you wonder how anyone, how everyone, how you fail to put these simple words this way before. How suddenly everything you have ever written becomes a waste of time. Everything cannot happen today, so not everything will. Perhaps this is not the day I die. This is not the day I become a perfect human being. Failure always seems an easy fit and close. To say I've had my share is conceit and inaccurate. What I've had, what has come to me, is barely audible sighs in the brazen glare of daylight and muted exhales slipping under the shyness of each night, is nothing more than what follows the ordinary on the planet of my birth. It is not hard to sustain this level of imperfection. One hardly has to try. I stand under stars existing outside time, rushing from every place to who knows where. They have something to do with me. I stand on the years it takes to make this story, rushing from its first word to wherever the last one goes. Nothing that tells a story waits for the end in the same place the story begins. Thank you. Thanks very much.